Good afternoon, Britain. 24 minutes past 1, and paramedics fear patients will be forced to wait for longer for ambulances to arrive.
Yes, because the NHS is set to introduce electric ambulances, raising concerns that the drive for net zero is being put above patient safety. Reports say electric ambulances will take up to 4 hours to charge and travel an average of only 70 miles. Surely this is impractical.
Well, is the NHS prioritising net zero over patients? Let's debate it. Joining us is senior meteorologist at the British Weather Service's Jim Dale, who thinks the NHS is not prioritising patients over net zero, and Deputy Director of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Montford, who thinks that the NHS are. Well, Andrew, I suppose you've got the case to make here. Are the NHS putting net zero above patients?
Well, clearly, if an electric ambulance can only do 70 miles at a time, then it is a real problem. The NHS doesn't have loads of money, so if you're going to have battery-powered ambulances that can only do that sort of distance, you're going to need a lot more of them, and it's going to cost a whole lot more money, which means you'll have less money to spend on other things, like actually delivering medical services. You can say it's rational to have a climate policy, but it needs to be a rational climate policy, and this clearly isn't rational. You actually look at the NHS's decarbonisation plan, and it's bonkers.
OK, Jim, let's pause. Sorry, Andrew, let's pause there and throw this over to Jim. This is irrational.
Not at all. It's why should the NHS be lagging behind the rest of industry? Even those that are mostly against or are totally against net zero, people like Richard Tice, Benabeep, they drive electric cars. Now, they're not in the public sector, that's their own private car, granted, but this is the direction of travel, and I think the NHS is moving in the right direction, albeit, and it will be.
But Jim, according to reports, paramedics are raising concerns that electric ambulances just aren't quite fit enough for purpose, i.e. they could potentially fail to reach people in time, the amount of electricity that needs to be used will drain the battery very quickly, and they may not be able to save lives at the same rate. Surely that's not worth it.
I hear what you're saying, Emily, but you've got to be very careful in terms of where these reports come from. They emanate from the Daily Telegraph, who do a lot of behind-the-scenes work and then put it on their inside pages in terms of the fear factor, in terms of these kind of evolutionary moves in terms of the green industry. And as I said to you, this is an evolution, not a revolution. It used to be back in the 1980s, we used to have those big phones. You remember those? And everybody used to say, oh, the brick phones, if you like. And no, that would never catch on. You know, you don't want one of them. They're too expensive, etc., etc. And then the scare about cancer. And now, look, everybody's got one and everybody works with it. It will be exactly the same with the electrification of vehicles, whether in the NHS or elsewhere.
Well, let's throw that back to Andrew now. Andrew, these things are becoming more and more common. Not every ambulance in the NHS is going to immediately be electric, but looking at some of these fancy electric cars now on the roads, these things go like the clappers. They're fast at accelerating, they're cool and futuristic. What's not to love?
Well, I'm sure this is why people like Richard Tice have one, because I'm told, I mean, I don't have one, but I'm told they're a lot of fun to drive and they accelerate really quickly. That's not really relevant for an ambulance. But what you want for an ambulance is reasonable speed for long distances, so that you can do lots of work and get lots of sick people to hospital. If you can only do 70 miles, well, I mean, from where I live, it's something like 40 miles to the nearest hospital. So you're going to be able to get from the ambulance to here. You might get back again, but maybe not. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous at the moment. So maybe in 50 years' time, when battery technology has improved, if battery technology improves, then maybe it will be possible. But to say we're just going to do it, this is very, very foolish.
Well, Jim, this is about so much more than electric ambulances. Next month, according to reports, the NHS will essentially be demanding a carbon reduction plan from its suppliers. So I come to the NHS saying I want to sell you 10,000 pens, and they say, oh wait, you have to fill in all these sheets of paper about what your carbon reduction plans are and what your carbon footprint are. This is going to raise costs, is it not?
Well, I'll tell you what, Emily, if we don't do these little steps, and these are little steps that you're talking about, if everybody contributes, it's actually a big step, because behind all of this and what we're actually talking about, the elephant in the room is climate change and the impacts of that. And I need to mention that as the world continues to warm up, as we speak in various countries around the world, as we go through one of the wettest winters, if not the wettest winter for some people on record in the UK. All of this comes back to that. Those are the underlying reasons for this. And it isn't just a wish thing to say, oh, yeah, we want faster cars, slower cars. But there's one other element, and that is the NHS are struggling as it is, okay? And the biggest problem is not going to be electric cars, it's electric vehicles. It's going to be what we have at this moment in time in terms of ambulances queuing up because there isn't enough money going into the NHS and there isn't enough staff. And that's where we get
but Jim,
problem.
Isn't the point that there's been a third extra funding, real terms, 1/3 extra budget for the NHS, and it doesn't feel like it? Why? Things are getting more expensive. Yeah. Why? Things like these green policies.
It's not things like these green policies, because these green policies in the NHS have hardly started. It's not that. Look at the history, the recent history, Tom, and everybody will realise that the NHS is on its knees because of the lousy handling by this of the UK government. It's as simple as that. It's not rocket science, this one.
Andrew, just lastly, an NHS Green team. Surely this is the way forward. £3 million on salaries for making the NHS green and beautiful.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is the way the state runs things, isn't it? You know, they appoint some more bureaucrats, and the bureaucrats are well paid, and they probably have electric cars and all this sort of thing. And the money just disappears away from where it's meant to be spent onto pen pushers.
Well, thank you very much. A great head-to-head there, Andrew Mumford and Jim Dale. Great to speak to you both. Good stuff.